Valley Forge National Park, celebrating Veterans Day. Thank you, veterans. A special thanks to our Papa, our favorite veteran.
To me, there really is no better backdrop for a Veterans Day commemoration than Valley Forge. And that is because this is arguably where the spirit of the American soldier was born. The meadows and woodlands that surround you are where General George Washington led his beleaguered troops in December of 1777. He and his forces were cold, tired, ill-equipped, and vastly undertrained. The British occupying Philadelphia, General Washington defied Congress's command to launch a midwinter's attack against the British and brought them here to rest and refit. Washington reported seeing his men without clothes, blankets, or even shoes. They left muddy footprints in the snow. Christmas Eve, he ate a meal of rice and vinegar. It was here, amidst the hardship of Valley Forge, General Washington's troops rallied and emerged as what we think of about American soldiers today. Disciplined and determined, steadfast and strong.
There's kids on the beds.
Uh-oh.
See?
I guess they don't mind, do you?
So this room can fit how many beds?
12 people.
Nice.
12. Well, it looks like
And it says,
you two
try out one of the bunks.
bunks.
Even says it.
This is the
Try
place
out
to
one of
try it
the
out.
bunks. Try it out.
That's kind of creepy.
Here, you want to try it out?
That's
You
so.
one of the 12 people sleeping in here?
Oh, no. I prefer my own comfy
Yeah.
mattress.
Would you like all the snoring in here from the 11 other people?
Let me try it out.
That and the coughing and disease. And
Oh my gosh. No.
Coffee and disease.
You can sit in the bunks.
You can get in the bunks.
You can get in the bunk beds.
You have to be under me if you're trying to get my hand, okay? I'm going up. Can I get on the top?
It says you're allowed to.
Yeah, that's one spot you are allowed to climb on the bunks here.
Are these bunks? I would like to climb on these.
That's the
No.
fireplace.
Hi, we're at Valley Forge, and I'm going to be in the video. And the deer are like, whoa.
You like that part?
Let's go. I feel like I smell cookies.
It does smell like somebody's cooking.
What is that?
50 caliber machine gun, I think.
Hi.
You're so
So
funny.
if you've never watched any other of Calvin and Ian's videos, I'm sad.
It's known as the Blue and the Brown Water Navy. Brown Water were boats that worked in the Mekong or along the coast. So I have a PBR, a River Assault boat, which was the South Vietnamese Army, Command Junk, also South Vietnamese Army, and a Swift boat, U.S. Navy Coastal. And I do this because everybody sees, you know, the stuff about the Vietnam War. They see aircraft carriers and battleships, the destroyers, smaller vessels, river assault types. But these, I actually built all these.
All right. Really?
I've been doing scale models since the age of 6.
Huh.
And when I did the PBR, it really went nuts. There's beer bottles on deck. And if you look at the back of this bulkhead, you'll see a poster of Raquel Welch from the movie 1 Million BC. I tried to be as authentic about this thing as I could get. So there's gas cans tied in for extra fuel. And the whole thing's a fiberglass boat. I mean, there's a little armor around that tub in the front, and there's some armor where the machine guns are sitting, but the rest of it's plywood, which will not stop a BB gun.
Whoa, look.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
No, it's a convertible. It's
The original
a.
from World War II.
This is from World War II.
Very good.
And then there's a gun right there.
So is that an actual authentic World War II, or is
Yes.
it a reconstruction?
No, this is 1942 Willys MB.
All right.
Almost all original.
Drive in it?
Yeah, I drove it here.
Oh my god. Like on the road?
Yeah,
It's road legal?
yeah. Doesn't go very fast, but yeah. Yeah.
Is more meant for terrain, I suppose, than
Oh, yeah.
speed.
Well, I mean, you put it in the four-wheel drive and the low range on the gears, so
Yeah.
it stops and you got torque.
There's a gun.
Huh.
That's so cool. This.
Got some grenades in case you get in traffic.
And this car actually works right now. It's very slow, but it actually works. Like,
Yep.
let it blow.
Got the extra gas tank there.
That is so cool. And this car actually works. It's very slow, but it works.
These are your doors. Yeah, they're not safety belts. Those are doors. That's another gun.
This is another.
Yeah.
Movie gun.
Movie gun.
What's your name, sir?
Wayne?
Wayne.
Rosencrantz.
Wayne
From Malvern.
All right. Well, thank you, Wayne.
Yep. Oh, enjoy.
All right.
Hey guys, how y'all doing? I'm Revolutionary War, so I'm basically wearing an outfit. It's actually more of a generic outfit because these guys were basically grabbing whatever they could get their hands on, and linen hunting shirts were kind of cheap and simple to get, so a lot of guys wore this. But in particular, in Whedon's and Muhlenberg's brigades out here, there were two regiments, the 12th and the 14th regiments, that were both actually issued white linen hunting shirts as their official uniform. So I'm basically dressed like one of them. So I'm dressed like one of the Virginia units that was out here. You go look around, everybody was wearing different clothes. By the time they're marching in here, whatever uniform you had been issued back in July or August had been torn to shreds, and you're just holding on to whatever you got left. Shoes wore out very quickly. I've discovered just in my own time of doing programs like this that I can wear holes out of the bottom of these shoes just from standing around and talking to people. So it doesn't surprise me when I hear stories about the guys marching in here in December barefoot. Like 2-3 months earlier, they had shoes, but they've worn them out from all the campaigning and everything.
Was it because they were primarily made of leather, or?
Yeah. I mean, you can patch up clothing. Like every guy here, every soldier would have had a sewing kit. As a matter of fact, a lot of the women who were in this camp often would work as seamstresses and would be patching up and mending clothing. But shoes, that's a skilled trade. You need a cobbler to make a proper set of shoes. That's not something that anybody can just sew up. So, yeah, getting them to the men was the big problem. This was an 8-year war, and every year, most of what you've been issued at the beginning of the year is gone by the end of the year because of the hardships of marching and working in the army. And so one of the biggest problems for Washington and Congress and the others wasn't supplying the men, it was continually having to resupply the men year after year after year. This is a British musket, but the French actually smuggled in anywhere from 100,000 to 200,000 muskets to the American Army.
Why do you have to march in the army?
Well, first of all, keep in mind these guys are marching in the thousands. When the American Army marched in here, they had 12,000 men. They want to keep them compact, tight together. If you stretch those men out over several miles, they become vulnerable and it becomes a lot slower for the army to get anywhere. So one of the ways that you can get people to march close together and cover a lot of distance very quickly is by getting them together and all marching at the same step. And it allowed big units, large groups of people to cover large areas of ground without getting stretched out. So that's why. A lot of people have argued that the drills that the Army does, the basic left face, right face, and trace themselves all the way back to von Steuben's drills here. But the drills here are specifically for getting into formation on the battlefield and marching from place to place in as efficient a process as possible. Now it's just a holdover. We do it to learn discipline and to learn to work as a unit. Back then, it had a function a life and death function on the battlefield.
What's the?
I thought it was
Gun cleaning kit. One of the big problems with the guns back then. Oh, look, I'm shedding. One of the big problems with the guns back then wasn't the gun; it was the gunpowder. The gunpowder didn't burn as clean as modern gunpowder. It made a lot of smoke every time you fired. It also left a lot of debris back in the barrel of the gun, and especially if all the moving pieces around here that allow the gun to fire, if any of this got too caked up with debris, it'll jam up and the gun won't fire properly. So after a lot of shooting on the battlefield, occasionally you had to be able to brush away all of that dirt and debris and clear it all out. Now, you don't want to do that with your finger, because by the time this has gotten coated, it's probably also really hot from all the shooting. Gun barrels and metal pieces on guns can get quite hot. There's also a little pick here that I use to clear out a little touch hole leading into the barrel of the gun that allows the gun to fire. So I had to be able to have this with me in case I needed to do that. Now, mind you, I'm saying that all like calm and everything because nobody's shooting at me right now. It's very easy to say, oh yeah, all you gotta do is this. It's another thing to say to try to do that while you're out on a battlefield and the enemy's shooting at you at the same time. Also, the thing that fires the gun is actually a piece of rock, a piece of flint in here. That flint, every time you fire, is going to get worn down more and more. So occasionally you had to have spare flints in your cartridge box that you could take out. You would unscrew this and replace it. As a matter of fact, let me see if I got it. Yeah. You can see I got my ammunition all rolled up. That's what bullets looked like back in those days. And then in here, see I got a couple spare flints in case the other one rolled out. I could put this one in its place, and it's got a real sharp edge to it so that when it scrapes against the steel plate, it makes a good spark. And in order to replace it, I would also have a little, really like a little multi-tool here. You can see it has 2 screwdrivers and a little pick, and I can take this to unscrew this bolt here and loosen this up to replace the flint. So
could you use both sides of the flint?
You could. Oftentimes, though, they tended to be angled like as a wedge in one direction, so that you keep. And you could also just push it up a little bit further and tighten it. There were a bunch of different adjustments you could make. So when you're firing the gun, basically what you would do is you would reach back and grab one of these paper cartridges. Now, this doesn't actually have a bullet in it. Normally back then, they would have a big round lead ball that was the actual bullet at the bottom of this tube of paper, and then the rest of the paper would be filled with gunpowder. And you do this rather than using those powder horns and stuff so that, you're not, it's a lot faster. You don't even have to look back. You can just reach back and grab it and pull it out. Then you rip open the paper to expose the powder, and then you pour some of the powder into this pan right here. And then you shut the pan to make sure that the powder doesn't go out. Don't worry, it's not going to explode. I'm not actually, oh, you got bees, gotcha. Then you take the rest of the powder and the bullet and the paper and you push it down the muzzle of the gun. Now you want to make sure that that powder sits really well down at the bottom of the gun so that it makes a good explosion, expands well and pushes the bullet out. So, gotta take out the ramrod, bring it around, push it all the way down. And by the way, you should hear a ding when I do this. Hear that? That means the gun's unloaded. That's one of the ways we could do a safety check. Bring the ramrod back. You don't want to lose that, otherwise your gun becomes a stick. And then to fire the gun, what would happen is, when I pull the trigger, this hammer here, where the flint is going to fly forward and scrape up against this steel plate. Flint and steel scrape against one another, you get sparks. So you should be able to see them go off. Saw those sparks? A little bit? Saw them a little bit? Okay. Now all those sparks then fly down into that pan. This gets pushed back, exposing all the gunpowder that I put in there, setting off the gunpowder. And then underneath there is a tiny little hole leading into the breech of the gun.
I saw that.
Yep. So some of the flame is going to shoot through that tiny little hole where the rest of the gunpowder is and set it off, pushing the bullet out. Boom. That's one shot. You want to shoot the gun again? Reach back, grab another, rip, pour, and so on. A well-trained British or American soldier was supposed to be able to load and fire 4 rounds in a minute. I am not a well-trained American soldier. It takes me a little bit longer. But again, as I told you before, it's one thing to be able to do it on a parade ground while you're training or while you're park ranger talking to visitors, and it's another thing to be able to do all of these very complicated maneuvers while you're on the battlefield and people are trying to kill you and your adrenaline is pumping and your hands are shaking. The toughest part is actually the ramrod. Even in training and drills, I have made mistakes where I have drawn the ramrod out and it's flown out of my hand and flown down the field over here, and it's what do I do now? Yay! If I'm nervous and scared, suddenly this becomes difficult to do very quickly with your hands shaking. Some of the guys would cheat rather than try putting this back in these tubes in its holder. Sometimes they felt it was just easier to stick it into the ground, have it right there when they're loading and firing, which is great until your officer tells you to advance or move somewhere and you forget to take it with you. Or the guy next to you takes a step to the side and bends it over and breaks it. So they were teaching these guys, never break the routine. Always load and fire the exact same way all the time. Another trick some of the guys did was not even use the ramrod at all. They would actually load and then they would hit the barrel, the gun onto the ground to make the powder settle down at the bottom. But sometimes that didn't always work, and if the barrel isn't packed tight enough, it doesn't expand quickly. And there were stories of guys actually firing guns and actually seeing the bullets ploop out 20 yards down the field. There were accounts also of soldiers on both sides, very lucky soldiers, who actually got hit by bullets. But because they hadn't been packed and didn't have the proper velocity, they literally hit them and bounced off of them simply because the guy hadn't loaded the gun properly. So again, the trick is do it the same way every single time so that when you are on the battlefield and you are freaking out, you don't even have to think about it. Your body just goes naturally and you treat it like a reflex.
Marching also scare away the enemy?
It can. There were a number of accounts of American soldiers running away just at the sight of the British coming down, especially when they had their bayonets attached. You see these guys coming at you. You all shoot at them, and they keep coming. They don't even hesitate, and they just come forward with a bayonet like this. And then they start getting close to you, and they might give a huzzah or a yell. There were a lot of guys, it could break the other side's will to fight. And there were a lot of cases where inexperienced soldiers who had never seen combat would run just by seeing this well-organized mass of men coming at them. I wouldn't want to be on the business end of this, There were also sometimes attacks where they attacked at nighttime or just before dawn, where they wouldn't even load their guns. They would only attack with the bayonet. The British were very good at fighting with the bayonet. The Americans over the war slowly got better at it. And this in particular is a copy of the British short land pattern musket, sometimes called the Brown
Daddy,
Bess.
Can we walk the trail?
You can actually see the year of it right there, and you can see the crown, the British crown with GR for Georgius Rex, or
The King.
King George.
King George.
You got it. My name is Dave Lawrence. I'm one of the park guides.
Thank you, Dave.
I was going to start bringing my seagull over.
Very nice. Now, what was that song called? Road to Boston. Now, would that have been something that was played for the soldiers?
Yes, that was a very common tune in the 18th century.
Would that be March 2 or?
Lasted all the way up through the Civil War 100 years later.
Continental Army.
I think you guys need a little more practice.
Calvin. Wow.
You gotten some prickly weed.
Yeah, I did. I found a grasshopper. It's my grasshopper.
Hold it, hold it, hold it. This is nature, you can do this.
It's a grasshopper.
Uh-uh.
Pooped on you.